Openings can be extremely tedious to remember. They can take days to gain a basic understanding of, weeks to memorize in full, and you still might come up against a move you've never seen before on move 4. In today's video, I want to show you all the way that I study openings. I want you to think of studying openings like a mathematical problem. If you don't have the formula to solve the problem, it's going to take 10 times as long because first you need to create the formula. But today, I'll be giving you the formula, so all you have to do is solve the problem. And just because I'm so confident in my study plan, I'm going to make things a little bit difficult for myself. I'm not going to ask for your blind trust that this study plan works, I'm going to prove it to you. With the study plan that I'm about to show you, I'm going to be learning from scratch the most theoretical opening in chess, the Sicilian Defense. If that wasn't hard enough already, I'm only going to be giving myself 24 hours to learn it. Of course, this won't include the time that I'm sleeping or not studying any chess, but anytime I'm studying, playing games, or anything under the same umbrella, it would be taken from my 24-hour allocation. And trust me, wait until the end of the video where I need to beat the person helping me learn the Sicilian Defense. But right now, you're probably all wondering the same thing. Where do we start? First of all, you obviously need to pick an opening. I'm not going to sit here and tell you what opening you should be playing for your rating level. To be honest, that could be a standalone video in itself. But for the sake of this video, let's assume that you already have one in mind. Now I want you to go ahead and Google your opening and variations. In my case, that would be the Sicilian Defense variations. Now you'll need to open up a Google Doc, or if you're more old school, a pen and paper. Write down the main variations in your opening. In my case, those are the Accelerated Dragon, the Rossolimo, the Alapin, the Smith-Morra Gambit, the Grand Prix attack, and the Closed Sicilian. Of course, there are many more variations in the Sicilian Defense, but we'll just start with those ones. Now that we've found our main variations, go to YouTube and find a video basically explaining those variations. These videos should be around 20 minutes long each and explained by a titled player. We want these ideas explained by a human first, so they stick in our memory. So, because I'm learning my opening along with you guys, let's complete phase 1 and begin to understand our openings. Altogether, watching these videos has taken 2 hours and 20 minutes off of my total 24 hours. So with our newly found understanding of our opening, let's start the next phase. Now, this is a warning. A lot of people watching this video will find this incredibly boring to do. One thing that any educational system has gotten right over the years is the ability to make you remember things you wish you hadn't once you left school. Why do I remember 100 facts about World War I that I wish I didn't know? Because they made me write 2,000-word essays about it. So we're going to apply a similar strategy to studying our openings. First, open up the Word document saved with all of your variations. Now, write down in sentence form the order in which all of the moves should be played. I don't expect you to be able to make concrete theory from a video you just watch on the internet, but it's very simple to find any theory from any opening in notation form on the internet for free. Literally just search French Defense Study Chess, and I guarantee there will be a public study available to at least get you started with your theory. If you need to, you can also refer back to the videos you just watched using an engine to make sure your moves are sound. If you're wondering where does the theory end, generally you should keep going until the engine suggests that the position is no longer sharp and there are multiple good moves for you. There are multiple reasons that we want to write down the theory in sentence form. The first reason is that writing something down is going to help you remember it because you've spent extra time writing it as opposed to just reading the notations. The second reason is that you can personify the moves that you will be playing. For example, you shouldn't be writing down, "Now we play d4." You should be writing, "Now we strike for the center with d4. Using personification in this way will help you remember your moves because you're giving meaning to the notations and not just writing numbers and letters. If at any point you need to go back through your theory, if you've forgotten something, it's much easier now because you've got an explanation of why that move was played in the first place. If you're not quite sure how you should be wording your theory, I'll leave the document to my full theory that I've written down myself. So here's a satisfying time lapse of me writing an ungodly amount of words on the Sicilian theory. Wait, let's make this a little bit more fun. Nobody wants to be writing hundreds of words at a time, so let's break this up a little bit. Every time you get to the end of a variation in sentence form, play that variation against a strong chess.com bot. If you don't know how to do that, go to an analysis board on chess.com and set up the position you wish to play from. For me, I just finished writing about the Maroczy bind. So I can set up this position, click play against a computer, change the rating of the bot to something realistic, and begin the game. This will help keep the theory fresh in your mind and stop you from forgetting it by the time you've written the second variation. So let's get back into the time lapse. Well, that took a long time. I ended up writing just shy of 3,000 words and it took 2 hours and 30 minutes to do. So that leaves us with 19 hours and 30 minutes left to learn the Sicilian Defense. Now, it should be noted that this is not a sponsored video. ChessBook is just very useful to learn openings with. You can get the full version of ChessBook for just $5 a month, or you can get your first 100 moves free, although this might not be sufficient for some openings. ChessBook is basically just flashcards for chess openings. When you learn a language, you're shown flashcards of words in that language, and you have to remember what they mean in English. When you flip the flashcard, it shows the answer. ChessBook works very similarly. You input all of the theory you have already written down, and it'll continuously quiz you on your own theory until you're getting it correct 100% of the time. ChessBook also directly links to the Lichess engine, so it's able to help solidify the theory you've already written. This means that any challenging lines you haven't put in your theory, you can add to your ChessBook repertoire and learn them from there. Hopefully I've explained well enough what ChessBook is. In my opinion, $5 a month is extremely reasonable, especially if you plan on learning the opening in just 1 month. There are some free alternatives to this, but the GUI can be very ugly, especially if you intend on spending tens of hours on it. Free versions can be found on sites like Chess Tempo, Chess Position Trainer, and many others. If you want to explore this further, you can just Google free opening repertoire builder chess, and you should find some results. Moving on though, there really is no set amount of time that you should be spending on ChessBook. You basically should keep going until you 100% know the theory. I also highly recommend you use chessvision.ai whilst using ChessBook. Again, this isn't sponsored, but chessvision.ai is a browser extension that scans your browser for a chessboard, automatically puts it into a Lichess board without opening a new tab, and lets you play around in the position with a 99 depth engine. ChessBook unfortunately will not tell you why certain moves are good or bad. This is because it gives you the freedom to do that yourself and lets you add literal blunders to your repertoire if you really want. Of course, you shouldn't do that, but it also means that ChessBook has no idea why you should be playing moves out of the opening, it just has an engine evaluation. With chessvision.ai, if you're ever stuck on one of the lines wondering, why can't I play this? Or why do I need to play this instead of this? You can confer with chessvision.ai without even needing to switch tabs, let alone set up an analysis board. I also feel like I need to mention this, but if you intend on cheating on chess.com or Lichess with chessvision.ai, I'm fairly certain they're partnered with one another, so your account will be flagged and banned for cheating if you try to do that. So let's get into another time lapse, and I'll see you all once I've done setting up my repertoire. Because I was pretty confident in my ability to set up the opening repertoire, I did this in just under 1 hour. But now that I've set my repertoire up, it's time to completely memorize it. But before we do that, it's important to mention one thing. When you start to practice your repertoire, you might notice that a move looks completely correct, but will be marked as wrong on your repertoire builder. This is because as you go through your repertoire, you need to add alternate moves, because in some positions, there will be multiple moves that transpose into the same setup. If at any stage you feel like a position has multiple correct moves, open chessvision.ai, scan the position, and see if the engine agrees that your move also works fine. If the engine does agree, click Edit in my repertoire builder and add alternate move. From here, go back to the main menu, and the next time you practice your moves, both will be available options. You may need to do this as many as 20 times for your entire repertoire. Very importantly, only do this if the engine thinks that your move is equal on evaluation to the one in your repertoire. In the opening, decimal point differences in the evaluation can mean a lot, as it's one of the most crucial parts of the game. And just a side note, out of everything we've done so far, this will take the longest. So, time to study. I'm pretty confident in my lines now. I spent over 2 hours memorizing my lines on ChessBook on top of the hour that we spent setting up the repertoire. We'll keep coming back to ChessBook every now and then to refresh our memory, but for now, let's move on to something else. A big mistake a lot of people make when they switch openings as opposed to learning their first opening is playing on the same account that they normally play on. It's so easy to get demotivated doing it this way because you're obviously going to play worse playing your new opening as opposed to your main opening. You might lose up to 200 elo because the difference is that big, and by the time you actually get to verse players that will be beneficial to help you out in learning your opening, you're probably a bit over the whole process already. So my recommendation for this is to either set up a training account on chess.com or Lichess. I should mention that training accounts do need to be authorized by chess.com before you use them. Realistically speaking though, there is probably no harm done as long as you don't break any of chess.com's rules. But if you want to be safe, you can create your account, email support@chess.com, and ask for permission to use the account for training. Realistically, chess.com has no reason to say no to this as long as you're using it for legitimate reasons. Once you've gotten permission to start using that account, I recommend you play 10-minute rapid games to start learning your openings. There are a few things to note first though. What happens if I get the wrong color? Just play the game normally. Realistically speaking, the performance with one color should not drastically skew your elo enough to be problematic. What happens if my opponent doesn't play into my opening? Same solution. Play whatever else you'd play and use it as an opportunity to practice your entire repertoire for that color. The main reason we're using an alternate account is to skip that feeling of losing hundreds of elo and being demotivated to play the opening. You should also still expect to lose a lot of games that you're playing with the new opening. That's just the nature of playing chess. With a fresh K factor, you can expect your elo to skyrocket up to a decent elo where your opponents will challenge you. Off camera, I've already spent around 2 hours on my main account playing Blitz with the Sicilian Defense, so we'll take that away from the 24-hour allocation. I'll also be playing 5-5 Blitz instead of playing Rapid. You can also do this, it has a very similar feel to Rapid. The reason that I'm doing this is because I have a speedrun series on the account that I'll be using and I don't want to intercept that. So let's get into the games. I ended up playing for about 4 hours with a total of 20 games. Of course, there is no set amount of time that you should be playing these games. Because I was playing on my Blitz account and comfortably beating 2000s with the Sicilian, I was happy to leave it at 4 hours. So with those training games done, let's move on to the next phase. Chess is not like riding a bike. If you stop playing for a long time, you will forget everything you know. Sure, you will remember how the pieces move, but you'll forget how to make good moves. You'll forget opening theory and game principles and everything that made you a good chess player. This is especially prevalent to openings. If you don't keep updating yourself on your repertoire, especially in the first month of learning, you'll just completely forget it. Incorrect moves could slip into your mind as correct ones, and that's not what we want at all. The first few months of knowing and understanding an opening is crucial. After a while, the opening theory will become ingrained into your memory and you probably won't forget it. But until then, you need to keep refreshing your memory and practicing your opening until that occurs. We currently have 10 hours and 30 minutes left of our 24-hour allocation. The only thing I can recommend from here is to continuously practice your opening on ChessBook and play on your training account. Don't worry, I'm also going to be doing this, so here's 10 hours and 30 minutes of my life condensed down into just 10 seconds. It's all well and good remembering a few opening lines, remembering 4 moves into every variation of your opening, but it all means nothing if you don't win your games. So what better way to test my theory and my game sense by playing the person who gave me the study in the first place? And we'll answer the question, can you learn the hardest opening in all of chess in just 24 hours? If I had to guess what my rapid elo would be with the Sicilian Defense, I would guess it's somewhere around 1900, which is why my opponent is 1900, despite me being 2300. Just because I haven't been playing the Sicilian Defense for long at all, only 24 hours, but I think I've learned it to a competent level. So we get to this position, it's a very standard open Sicilian or accelerated dragon position. Hopefully I'll pause the video and look back at why this is the theory. But we get to this position, where I'm considering knight g4 at this point, which is a common theme in the Sicilian Dragon. The idea is that you want to play knight g4, hitting the bishop. If the queen takes, you take in the center on d4 because you have a discovered attack on the central knight. The issue is after knight g4, there is knight takes knight, hitting the queen, then you take the bishop, then they take your queen, you take their queen, and they take your pawn, and it's kind of just an ugly variation. Hopefully that is on screen for you guys to visualize. And I'm also just calculating the other lines. So d5 right now doesn't seem right. I was trying to remember. D5 didn't seem right. A5 is the correct move here. You're supposed to play A5 to go and harass the bishop. You're planning to play A4 at some point. And the point is that you do want to play D5 on the next move, ideally. And it's a complete sacrifice of a pawn because everything gets so unbelievably active. You open up the D file, opening up the D file opens up your light square bishop. Your rook will get active on the A file once you sacrifice that pawn as well, so F3 is the correct move here. And now you play D5, sacrificing the pawn, and hopefully there will be a bunch of arrows for you guys to see it, how everything just gets so unbelievably active. The knight goes to B4. Harassing the C2 square, which would be a fork, and once you play A4, you can even sacrifice the rook at times to get knight C2 check, forking the king and the rook, and there's just a bunch of really nice tactics in this line, and I'm calculating it right now because I'm not exactly sure if I'm, this is one of the harder lines, like it's one of the more in-depth lines because you do have to sacrifice a lot of material, so I'm just making sure that I'm getting it right here, and I've got a bit of time to kind of figure it out, so I figure why not. So D5 is the move here. They can also take with the bishop. There are lines where you'll go bishop E6. There are lines where you'll go knight B4 after. It depends what they capture with, really. But if they capture with a heavy piece, the likelihood is that you'll recapture with the knight and then go knight B4. Hopefully that will be on screen. But I've studied all of these variations, so I'm pretty confident that if I have like at least a minute to think about them, I will get to the right conclusion. So I go knight b4 here. The idea is that we want to play knight f takes d5. The main idea behind that is to, one, link up the knights, open up the bishop, and attack the e3 bishop. My opponent, I'm not sure if he plays the correct move here. I think bishop f2 is the correct move. Oh no, sorry. Bishop f2 is the correct move once we take on d5. But it's a little bit difficult to play for white already. And they play knight b5. I think the correct move was knight e2. Knight e2 was the correct move. Knight d e2, that is. And you want to discover the defense from the queen onto the d5 pawn. But here is where we sack the next pawn. We play a4. The idea with a4 is that if you take with any of the pieces, we're removing a defender from the d4 square, and we can jump in with our f knight, unleashing our dragon bishop. And you can see all of our pieces are very active here. The light square bishop can see the whole diagonal. The rook on the a file is becoming open because we're going to sack the pawn. The queen is gonna become open because we've sacked the central pawn. The knight is going to get into the game. The knight is already on b4. Another one's coming to d5. And you can see how active this position is. And this is theory, by the way. This is, well, I mean, knight b5 is a mistake from my opponent. I'm getting up here because my dinner was in the oven. And I had to go turn the oven off, which was kind of a flex, but I'll come back in a second. And I'm pretty sure that I'm going to play knight f takes d5 here. I'm considering a4 immediately, but I mean, you have to play knight f first, tempo on that bishop, and then the bishop has to slot back to f2. The really good thing about this line is that white hasn't castled yet, and you didn't give white an opportunity to castle. So you get all of this tempo, you sacrifice the 2 pawns to get all of this tempo on the pieces. Oh, we played a4. Okay, we played a4 first. Yeah, a4 was the correct move, sorry, a4, and then you have to remove the defender, and then the f knight jumps in with tempo on the bishop. And that was the last move of theory. a4 was the best move in the last position. But after knight d5, I didn't quite continue to get all of the theory correct. Because he plays bishop d4. Now, I watched a lot of Daniel Naroditsky videos, and I didn't like taking the bishop. It just felt wrong to trade off the bishop in that fashion. So I kind of it is the best move to trade off the bishop, and then you go I think bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes a4, bishop takes a4, and queen a5 is the best because you're forking the bishop and the discovery on the king. So knight takes c2, for example. Hopefully we'll have it on screen so you guys can see, but I missed that. It's not a part of my theory because I've not had the chance to look at knight b5 yet because it's not a good move. This is actually -1 or something, this position. So really not good for white, but I liked the discovery immediately, even though that he can take my bishop first. I thought that if he takes my bishop, I have knight c2 double check, which I thought was really good. And at the very least, I'm going to take back the bishop on g7. I'm hitting everything in the position. I can take the rook after because it's a fork. I can take the hanging b5 knight, and he takes my bishop there, which is a blunder. I think the correct move here was actually knight e3, if I remember correctly. Hopefully I'll have that up on screen so I don't find the correct move again, but this is what I mean. I don't think I've actually said it yet. I think I say it after this game, where it's one thing is remembering the theory, and another thing is figuring out what to do after you get out of theory, because you're not going to be able to play the full game in theory. And I mean, this position is still complicated, and clearly my opponent is having some difficulty here, up 3 points of material, but the position is unclear. My opponent has to stop castling. If he went king f1 there was knight e3 check, winning the queen. I can also just win the knight. My rook is hanging on f8. My knight is also hanging on both squares that they're on right now. So it's not exactly clear what the best move here is. I just take the bishop. And my idea is, if you take my knight on c2, I'm going to take your knight on b5. And if you take my knight in the center, I'm going to take the rook on a1. That was generally my idea. But he takes my knight on c2, so I take his knight. And now I've got a very, very strong knight in the center of the board. He could just trade it off and be fine, but I still think this position is very good for me. He can't castle. He's got a bad knight himself. He plays knight c3, which is a mistake because now I have a lot of checks. Queen b6 check was slightly better than queen c5. I thought it was just a little bit more active. And my opponent has to be very careful here. I thought king e2 was the best move here. Although maybe there's queen e3 there, queen e3 check, and then the king has to go away. I'm not entirely sure. But there is one move that my opponent certainly can't play. And it's that one, because at e3 is a check that picks up the queen with the king. And my opponent resigns very promptly here. And this is just how dangerous the Sicilian can get. And I've only been learning it for less than 24 hours. And I've already remembered, I think this was 12 moves of theory that we went into. And I remembered it, and I managed to punish my opponent who taught me this theory in the first place, and he resigns. And that was the game. The main takeaway from the game that you just saw is that learning opening theory can be extremely easy. I learnt over 10 moves of theory in the Sicilian in just under 24 hours of studying. But the reality is, when you get out of theory and need to make plans on your own, it's very, very difficult. It's something that you simply cannot perfect in just a couple of days, and something that takes months and months of practice. But I genuinely still don't think there's a better way to go about it than the study plan that I outlined in this video. Regardless, I hope you've all enjoyed this video on studying openings. Let me know what else you'd like to see on this channel in the comments below. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.